Kansas has this narrative about coming into the Union as a free state, and it's a noble narrative.
Kansas was the free state, founded by abolitionists, has a framework of laws that were actually far more progressive than some of our neighboring states, like Missouri, the slave state coming into the Union. So there's a background and a history. Women could vote in Kansas and own property in Kansas well before they could do it nationally.
Kansas was a lot like the states in the Deep South. Lots of rapes, lots of riots, a lot of racial purgings, lynchings, all those things happened, right? And yet there's still that noble narrative. The free state, John Brown, the beginnings of the Civil War.
It is unfortunate for the new state of Oklahoma that she has classed herself with Mississippi and sundry other semi-barbarous southern states by the adoption of Jim Crow legislation, which denies Negroes the right to mingle with whites in hotels and on railway trains.
Back in the 20s, William Allen White was blacklisted by the Daughters of the American Revolution.
They blacklisted White, they blacklisted Clarence Darrow, they blacklisted the YMCA, I think. They blacklisted some Catholic organizations and some Jewish organizations. They were sort of charging that these people or these groups were un-American. And it is sort of difficult to pin down, okay, what exactly did they do that made them so angry, right? White pins it down for them.
The DAR has yanked the Klan out of the cow pasture and set it down in the breakfast room of respectability, removing its hood and putting on a transformation. Mrs. Broso is a lovely lady with many beautiful qualities of heart and mind, but in her enthusiasm, she has allowed several lengths of her Ku Klux nightie to show under her red, white, and blue.
The nation's most impressive Easter demonstration. 75,000 massed before Lincoln Memorial to hear Marian Anderson, colored contralto, make her Capitol debut at the Great Emancipator Shrine. Refusal of the DAR to let her use their hall fanned a countrywide controversy, with this great gathering as the climax.
Liberty is the only thing you can't have unless you give it to others.
The history of journalism in this country, I believe, is actually much more partisan than people recognize. You know, the idea of the modern objective journalist is a pretty recent thing. And so most small towns would have a Democratic paper and a Republican paper. You know, towns in Missouri would have a segregationist paper and an abolitionist paper. And so you kind of had to take a stand. As an editor, you had politics.
Journalism as a institution evolved in the same way, a much stronger sense of its role as a, speaking truth to power.
Teddy Roosevelt is often credited with enticing white into the more progressive world. But I would argue that, in fact, the fact that William Allen White stayed in a small town, which is a very democratic place where everybody has to rub up against each other, and you know your neighbors, and you know the lowliest guy on the block, and you know the richest person, and you understand they're not really that different. And you may not understand that living in a big city in the way you do living in a small town.
When your world is awry and hope dead and vitality low and the appetite gone, there is no ocean trip, no month in the country, no known drug equal to the reviving quality of 24 hours spent on the front porch or in the sitting room of the White's house in Emporia.
I can remember going as a child over there, and he was in his hammock on the porch in a loose-fitting Panama-type suit with his leg over the side of the hammock swinging there. Their housekeeper was another fixture named Bertha Cole-Glazer. I should mention her. But she was also their cook, and was a fabulous cook. And I remember eating over there, and Mr. White did his thing, tossing the salad. So mix it up with vinegar and oil with the lettuce,
Personally, White is the most unattractive man in Emporia, and that is saying much. You see him as he comes rolling down the street on his way to the Gazette office, and you wonder that he ever did anything but sit in the shade of a tree and drink lemonade. His clothes look as if they had been planned and cut out by the town tinner. His hat is the most impossible structure in the world. The face is the ordinary fat man's face and is usually covered with a short stubble of sandy beard and a sheepish smile. There is a half-suppressed twinkle in the eye that suggests an overgrown boy. Altogether, you would say that the man was made of putty, were it not for a certain firmness about the jaw, indicating that there is steel beneath this flabby exterior, and plenty of it, too.
The Whites' cabin in Estes Park, Colorado, became their private sanctuary. White would write and relax and recover from bouts of depression and from his hectic work and travel schedule.
Sally, in all of William Allen White's life, was in the background by choice.
His wife was a very strong personality, part of his life, but it never really, I think, seemed to occur to them that she would have her own career or her own life. They were a partnership, and she was his first and best editor. I would say William Allen White was a feminist for his day, but would not be considered today's feminism.
My advice to women is to raise more hell and fewer dahlias.
He was definitely a believer in women's suffrage.
Kansas should be the 6th state in the Union to do justice to women by giving them the right to vote. So long as women pay taxes, maintain homes, and rear young and help men to what small decency they have, women should have the right to vote. The men of Kansas are now given an opportunity to show their manhood by giving women a voice in the affairs wherein both men and women are vitally interested.
He supported women's careers. The test would have been, if his daughter had grown up and, graduated from college and wanted to do something, what might have happened there.
Henry Seidel Canby, his colleague from the Book of the Month Club, wrote of White, "One saw in him how a good molder of public opinion functions. He must have honesty himself. He must have modesty. He must have courage. He must have deep convictions. He must be willing to believe that his opponent is as human as himself." The country was debating whether to enter into World War II. But our allies in England and other countries were suffering attacks from Nazi Germany. Marshal Stimson approached White to chair the Committee to Defend America by aiding the Allies. Stimson would state, "No other man in the country, I think, would have had the public confidence which would have enabled him to so quickly get together so large and responsible a body of the citizens."
There was a way in which William Allen White was not a journalist in the modern tradition, because he was basically an editorialist and a journalist at the same time, and he kind of wove those two things together. And that's something you could do at that time. But he also kind of understood that journalism had a public service that really started with reporting, that started with separating fact from mythology, fact from fiction, fact from hyperbole. And the positions he took were based on that.
The way William Allen White operated in his time, opinion journalism versus straight journalism, and the way they're operating now, say, in the Fox News, MSNBC mode. The old-fashioned journalism, there were 3 forms of it, all of them legit. There was straight news reporting, there was analysis reporting, analysis journalism, and then there was opinion journalism. And they were done by 3 different sets of people. And the reporters didn't give their analysis or give their opinions. The analysis people just did analysis, they didn't give their opinions. And the opinion people didn't do any reporting. I mean, in other words, it was all separated, and the readers understood these lines and what they meant. And William Allen White was one of those people who perpetrated that and followed that.
And so we're now in a period in which, in journalism, things seem to be going full circle, that attitude and kind of position taking those things are superseding actual facts, and that's a problem in journalism. And I think William Allen White helped usher in kind of a golden age of journalism in which responsible journalism became the norm. Irresponsible journalism was pushed to the margins. And I think we're at a point now where there's some danger of going back in the opposite direction, that responsible journalism is getting pushed to the side, and irresponsible journalism, or what passes as journalism, is becoming more dominant.
Because you don't like a story or because it presents you in a bad light, wow, it's fake news.
Fake news is something that seems to have come into sort of the parlance of the day. We used to call it lies, or we used to call it fabrications, because it's news that was made up for the purpose of either frightening people or getting them to respond in a certain way. It's not even news that's coming from any kind of legitimate news organization. I mean, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes in our reporting, and we own them. But this is purposeful.
If I was a conservative viewer, I could see how some people would be really frustrated with the news. I think it's an overreaction to just say it's fake, and then to subscribe to news that really is fake and propaganda that is fulfilling to you, but not necessarily the truth.
Particularly in this last campaign, we started hearing about people who were primarily selling their ideas to advertisers and saying, if I write that Hillary Clinton is running, a child pornography ring in some pizza house in New York, people will click on that. So the term clickbait came into parlance as well. And advertisers then, because they see there's a certain number of eyeballs, would pay that person to write those stories. And they're not journalists. That's one aspect of fake news. Another is, basically what we would call propaganda.
Even if you know websites or news sites, it's very hard to tell because people do such a great job of faking it, including President Trump, who faked all these covers that he hangs in Mar-a-Lago. It's not that hard to do, and you can put all kinds of scurrilous things in there, or dangerous things, or just flat misleading. It's a very messy swamp to navigate for any consumer of news. And it's gotten so polarized that it's day or night news. You're either here or you're there. There's very little middle ground, and the middle ground used to be the facts, just the facts. Well, we do not have the facts dished out to us regularly in any way anymore.
Good that's coming out of the Trump thing is that everybody's taking some deep breaths. Oh my God. The need for straight reporting is stronger now than it has been in a long time. And so there's more of it, and it makes some people mad, and some people can't tell the difference because they're geared to, oh well, everybody's editorializing in news stories. Well, that's not true. It's not. But anyhow, some people think that, and if it's a negative story, it's got to be of an opinion story. No. It's maybe just the facts.
It has been my experience that most reporters that I've come in contact with probably do identify as left of center. What people don't tell you, though, is that our newspapers and our media is owned by about 6 companies, and they're run by conservatives.
This is a compilation courtesy of Deadspin that's gone viral this weekend. Just a little taste of what these promos look like.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
A lot of the kind of proto-fascist figures that arose in the 1930s, he kind of saw them all of a piece with these sort of demagogues and people who appealed to the lowest fears of the population.
I think today there are people who are very afraid, and maybe legitimately, of these incredible demographic changes that the country's undergoing. But what you don't get from White is the fear. You get the nobility of the heartland without the fear. And in that sense, it is noble, it is beautiful. But with the fear, it becomes something completely different.
And I think that was the other part of William Allen White's life that's important to recognize. He saw journalism as being central to the democratic experiment of America and followed through on that every day and actually made it real because he had an impact on that political life. And so I think it was possible. And I think he would say, keep your principles, stick to your principles, and have confidence they will win out in the end.
Life magazine said of White, he is the small-town boy who made good at home. To the small-town man who envies the glamour of the city, he is living assurance that small-town life may be preferable. To the city man who looks back with nostalgia on a small-town youth, he is the living symbol of small-town simplicity and kindness and common sense.
I still today feel like William Allen White represents that noble narrative that we haven't lived up to, but that we should continue to strive for.